So my name is Robert Federowicz. I am the president of the Hive Vegan Eatery, and I've been vegan since 2009. My reason was compassion. It was something I saw in a flyer or a brochure called Why Vegan, and obviously I'm no dummy. I knew where meat and dairy came from, but for whatever reason I chose to ignore it, and one picture in the brochure was enough to kind of push me over the line, and I didn't even at that point consider going vegan.
Where did you see this brochure at?
It was an international festival in Houston, in downtown Houston.
Okay. And what was the photo?
The photo was an image of a chicken being debeaked, and it was something that I didn't know happened in the industry. And obviously there are more gruesome things that happen to animals, but that was the one that did it for me, and never looked back since.
Prior to that, had you ever thought about going vegan?
No, not really. I'm originally from Poland, so kind of a meat and potato part of the world. Enjoyed all meat dishes. I even disliked a number of vegetables, but all that changed eventually. And the interesting thing is, once I decided to go vegan for those particular reasons, I didn't even have the cravings. Those were just, they automatically became unnatural.
Did you do it overnight, like just instantly?
No, so the process actually started in 2007 when we went to the vegan festival, handed the brochure, I saw the image and decided to become vegetarian. So at that point I said no meat. And also at that point I started to do a lot more research. At that point I was a personal trainer, so in a way brainwashed into thinking that animal protein is the only protein that is bioavailable, and without it you struggle. So it took a while. My wife and our daughter were vegetarian for several months, if not a whole year, and then we became pescatarian. Finally, I think last thing obviously was honey. So now knowing what I know, we could have been vegan overnight, and that would have been perfectly fine.
Yeah, but some people benefit from taking their time. You know, that way they can acclimate to these new foods. Were you already used to eating these foods, the vegan foods?
So in 2007, 8, and 9, there weren't that many vegan restaurants in Houston. There were maybe 2 or 3, pretty far from where we lived. One was relatively close, so we made it a point to support that one by eating there twice a day, every day, to make sure that they don't go out of business. Because if it wasn't that, then we would have to actually cook. Which, you know, what became apparent is that when we were eating meat, like majority of the people do, our diet was pretty boring, because it was we didn't really search out different things. It was almost the same thing over and over again. Once we took that, few ingredients out, then we were suddenly exposed to a whole new range of dishes that we didn't know existed.
Yeah. Like what?
Well, number one, back then there were not a lot of, the fake meats or the meat substitutes, or any really edible cheeses. So we were eating more tofu dishes, for example, which we ate every once in a while, but now it became almost like a staple. That kind of transferred also to desserts, which are kind of hard for existing, let's say, desserts that have animal ingredients like eggs and creams and things like that. Then it became kind of almost a challenge to, well, let's make the same dessert but make it vegan, and tried with this egg substitutes like
flax and water.
Flaxseed, ground flax, and
Sometimes I'll use bananas.
bananas, applesauce, all those things. So we tried everything to see which one for that particular dessert made the closest to what we used to.
So you went from just cutting these things out, and then you just started experimenting. And did you have any challenges in respect to like feeling like uncomfortable, like bloated?
No. So I don't think that my fiber intake before was low. So that was maybe the reason that I didn't, let's say, suffer the unwanted consequences of veganism. So as far as that, no problems at all. And if anything, I think I can't remember if I used to be getting sick more, like like a kind of a seasonal flu or a cold and things like that. But ever since, that all went away. I was just that issue of I don't remember even living in Houston to suffer from allergies anymore. If I had them, I don't remember. Maybe they weren't that bad, but I honestly now I can say that nothing, quote, bulletproof now. But
anything changed physiologically, mentally, emotionally?
Yes, I think in all those. Number one, physically, I've noticed that I would recover much faster after workouts. I discovered that I had more energy. So not being a runner, I decided to a half marathon, and I did it with a relatively decent time. As far as now not contributing to the suffering of animals, became more conscious of the suffering of animals. It's almost like unwillingly, once you become vegan, you automatically become an activist. Now, every time you bring up the point that you're vegan in some context, when asked, like, would you like to eat something? And I said, well, no, I'm vegan. Then suddenly I discovered that everybody is a nutritionist and expert at that, which automatically made me do more research and be able to, let's say, be more knowledgeable when defending my stand. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And then initially it was, I used to be more combative with the points that I was making, and then later I discovered that it's got to be the right time and the right place for someone to become vegan, and it's more about those little seeds that you plant, even with someone who is violently opposed to your point of view, because I've had people like that, friends and acquaintances or people I've met, sometime later, suddenly they're vegan. It took them a while to come to the same conclusions. They were just not ready when we were talking.
But as far as like you personally, did you notice any changes in like your emotions or off camera? Didn't you say you were like less aggressive or angry?
Yes and no. I became angry about other things. But we were, my wife and I were already involved in animal rescue. So we were there. We were doing the typical, a dog is a dog, but a cow, that's completely different. And all it took is, once we became vegan, it's like we realized that it's all the same. And maybe that's why it made it easier, because we were already, really emotionally vested and rescuing these cats and dogs out of kill shelters or off the street, picking them up, taking them, getting them vetted, finding them homes and things like that. And at some point it clicked. I mean, how can we do this and then turn around and spend money on an industry that mistreats and kills animals? And they're all the same.
So you were, before you went vegan, you were like helping dogs and
Right,
cats.
yes. So we were, doesn't matter what animal, we were already helping. And it just, once we became vegan, then it kind of closed the circle. It was, then we felt completed because just before it was like two separate things. And then once we became vegan, we kind of became part of this process. That's much wider. And then we, once you start reading more, you find out, okay, if you're vegan for a year, you end up saving, this many cows, this many chickens, this many fish. It's kind of translated into those animals. 13 years later, that's, thousands of animals that we saved by not actually doing something. We're saving them by not doing something, which is the easiest thing you can ever do. You don't even have to try, you just don't do something, and suddenly, and it's not exactly like just because I don't go and buy a burger doesn't mean that a cow is saved, but if enough people do it, it has an impact on the industry. The industry is in it for the money, and they will go where the money is. So if there is more demand for vegan products, the same company that is slaughtering cows will switch to Beyond Meat or Impossible Burger.
Before, there was a little bit of cognitive dissonance.
Oh, it was completely cognitive dissonance. It's like the title of the book, I might misquote it. The title of her book was Why We Wear Cows, Eat Pigs, and Love Dogs. And that's basically the disconnect that people have. And apparently that's a coping mechanism that humans have because humans in general are sensitive to suffering and pain. I mean, if a person saw someone walking down the street kicking a pig, they would be insulted. They would try to stop it from happening, but the same person will go and have pork chops. There's apparently this gap in your thinking where you can picture a cow grazing on the field, and then you can picture a steak, and you very effectively block out everything in between, because if you knew that, you couldn't really do it. So it's one of those things.
So it sounds like you're pretty committed. You're never going to eat another animal.
Yeah, and it's like people say the theoretical situations. You're going to be on a deserted island with a pig. Well, I actually came up with a pretty, I think, sensible solution. I'll basically follow the pig and eat what the pig eats, and I'm going to be fine. And at least I'll have a companion, which is more valuable than a one-time meal. But it's funny that those arguments are coming from people who know that they will never be in a situation like that. We're 2023, 2022, in one of the most advanced countries in the world. Yeah, you're not going to end up on an island with a pig. It's not going to happen. And it comes to survival. Yes, people do things when they're trying to survive. They will eat other people. Yes, it's possible, and I might even do that if I was ever in that situation, but it will never happen. So, I rather do the reality part this way, and the theory is going to stay that way until it actually happens, and I'll deal with that problem.
You might as well keep your behaviors in line with reality here and now. Yeah. So is your wife vegan too?
Yes. And she was, interestingly enough, she was vegetarian for a while when she was a teenager, and then she apparently was a vegetarian and worked at a steakhouse as a waitress. And someone asked her once, are the steaks any good? And she says, I don't know, I don't eat meat. And they said, then what are you doing here? And she thought about it for like 5 minutes, and I don't know, and she quit. So it was just kind of interesting. And my ex-wife, which we're all friends, still very civilized situation. I remember it was maybe end of the 90s, and she saw some documentary somewhere, and she was shocked, and she was trying to be vegetarian or vegan, and I laughed it off. I ridiculed it. I I was not ready. And to me, that was the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And that's why I can relate to people who respond to me that way when I bring it up. I mean, that was the closest person to me, and I blew it off. I basically said, that ain't happening. You know, I don't intend on doing that. It was just not the right time. I guess mentally I wasn't there.
I usually like to ask people, was there ever a time before you went vegan that you thought there's no way I could do that? And it sounds like you've pretty much already answered that.
Yes, yes. I never really had, like, you know, I was not surrounded by vegan people, so I wasn't exposed to some of the ideas. If I heard about someone not eating meat, is because they didn't eat meat since they were kids because they didn't like the taste or texture. And I liked the taste and I liked the texture, so that was not really an argument. I think if early enough I was able to connect the dots between animal suffering and eating meat, it might have happened a long time, because I was always kind of an animal person.
Yeah. That's cool that you're an animal lover, like a lot of people are. I think everybody is innately, you know. Nobody, like you said, nobody wants to see an animal get hurt.
So I think a couple of things kind of happen at the same time. Number one, a lot of things we eat are cultural. So the fact that I moved to the US from Poland, I was kind of taken out of the culture and some of the traditional events that where you usually eat meat. Now, it's going to sound weird because I moved from Poland to Texas. There's like barbecues every weekend, so it's not like it doesn't happen here. But it wasn't, it's much easier to decide on your own to not do it and not be around people like your family who are pressuring you into doing it or do not understand what you're doing. So that's something that might be easier, for example, for a kid to go vegan once he goes to college, because he's out of the environment, he's a new place. Yeah, he might be, pizza and beer, but if he decides to go vegan, he won't have the additional stress of having to deal with family members trying to influence him.
I've noticed that there's a lot of Jewish people that are vegan. And right now, there's more black people going vegan than any other race. Maybe it's for the same reasons.
So I try to maybe read into it more than I should, or trying to put words into thoughts into someone else's head. But to me, all those sayings, it's an animal holocaust. People get triggered by the word, but it is what it is. The reason that Holocaust happened is because one group of people didn't consider another group of people human. And that's the only thing that allowed them to do to them what they did to them. Because you have to disassociate yourself from that group and not consider them like you to be able to do those things to them, because otherwise you couldn't. So that's the link I see with that part of history and that group of people. Now, as far as black people, for example, I almost think that, and this might be wrong, but I would find people like black people, artists, women, they should have an easier time relating to vegans or veganisms than other groups of people or other genders, simply because they in some way and some time were
subjugated.
So it should be easier for them to relate, let's put it that way. To me, every artist should be a vegan, because to me, I have this vision of artists having a more sensitive soul. So to them, this should be easier. They're not hardened. So they're like I think the easiest group of people to become vegan is kids. They're not warped through tradition. They're not warped through habit. They're not warped through conditioning. And to them, it's natural. Every cartoon they've watched had animals in them, and they were friends. And suddenly, they stop watching that. They become adults, and they eat what they loved. At some point, if they don't cross over to that phase, then it's very easy for them to stay vegan. Especially nowadays, it's very easy. Before you went to a restaurant that doesn't have a vegan menu, or you're stuck with a salad or French fries. Now, it's hard to find a restaurant that doesn't have a vegan menu. It's much easier as far as convenience. I mean, I think that's also something that is causing the growth of the popularity of veganism around the world.
Yeah. I heard there's 32 vegan restaurants in this area.
Yep. So there was a list compiled on Facebook by someone, and the 32 or close to 40 involved pop-ups, brick and mortar, and food trucks. So that was.
You have a child, and is she vegan?
Yes, she's vegan. So she went vegan at the same time we did. She was in high school, and now she just turned 30, and still vegan. Has her own daughter, 3.5, Ezra, vegan.
And she's vegan from conception, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
So that's why when we sometimes see these extreme news articles about the parents starving the kid by feeding them vegan food, they weren't feeding them vegan food. They were basically not feeding them. They were malnutrition, and that's why they were sick and died.
And we don't question it when it happens to non-vegan.
Exactly.
Which it happens every day.
Yes. And the interesting thing is there are countries around the world where their kids are naturally vegan. They live, they're either poor, they can't afford animal products. If anything, they might have dairy every once in a while, but not to the extent that it happens in the developed countries. I mean, when I was talking to my grandparents when I went vegan, and that's a group of people that's really, the older someone is, the harder it is to kind of introduce them to these concepts that are pretty foreign, and then try to convince them that, let's just say, you take the compassionate angle. It's going to be hard because that would mean they would have to accept the fact that they did something cruel for 80 years of their life. Or try to convince your parents that meat and dairy is unhealthy, because that would mean they would have to accept the fact that they fed you in an unhealthy way. They raised you by feeding you horrible things. So that's also, that's another thing that is hard to overcome.
Yeah. You and I were talking again off camera, and you mentioned earthlings, and in the beginning they say truth is often met with resistance, opposition.
It goes through 3 phases.
Yeah.
It's ridicule,
violent opposition,
and then acceptance. Yeah.
And maybe the ridicule is their knee-jerk reaction because of what you just said there about, in their mind, they did this for all this time.
It would be accepting something that, accepting that they did something wrong or an error. But then I take a step back and for example, let's say my grandparents' contribution to animal suffering was much less than, for example, mine was when I was eating meat. When they were growing up, if they had meat once a week, that was it. When they had milk, they had it from the cow that was standing outside grazing the grass. So, when they had eggs, they had the eggs from a chicken that run around the yard. So it's going to be harder for them to see the suffering angle that is, obvious to us when we see the, industrial level of animal agriculture right now. It's completely different. I mean, some of the things I mentioned that happen, they said, no, it doesn't. I had chickens, I didn't debeak them. Exactly. So it's kind of, maybe that's why there was not a very strong, vegan movement then that was geared strictly driven by the compassionate angle, as opposed to what it is right now, because now there's no denying it. So the impact on the animals themselves, on the planet, I mean, it's horrible. Health. I mean, you take a random black and white picture from the 60s, 70s. Pick one of people on a boardwalk or on the beach. No one's overweight. I mean, everybody's normal size. So were they all starving? No. Were they all dieting? I don't think so. But whatever people are eating now, or how much of certain things they're eating, and without getting into what's modified, genetically modified or not, what has growth hormones and what doesn't, it's
Well, it goes back to what you were saying. It's more widespread available. So animal has more fat, and fat has 9 calories per gram. Protein and carbs only have 4. So if they're eating animals every meal, as opposed to once a week, then they're getting excess calories every meal.
Right.
Instead of just once a week.
And then the fact that it's been shown that every time you consume animal products, you cause an inflammatory state in your body that lasts 3 to 4 hours. But if you end up eating every 3 to 4 hours, then you're in a constant state of inflammation. So something has to give. So your body doesn't have enough resources to deal with other things if it's just dealing with inflammation associated with your diet.
So your granddaughter's doing fine?
Perfectly fine. Goes to the doctors, get checkups, and all of them are fine. So.
Awesome. And then eventually you started this restaurant.
Yes. So the restaurant is, let's put it this way, I never envisioned myself as a restaurant owner. Yeah. It kind of, in a way, fell into our lap. We own a cryotherapy business located next to a place that was a number of restaurants. When we initially moved into our space, there was an Italian restaurant that was, I think, the last month or two of the Italian restaurant. Then a Mexican restaurant moved in. They stayed open for about 2 years. Then they moved out. It was vacant for a couple months. Then a Puerto Rican restaurant moved in. They were open for a few months. I think the Puerto Rican restaurant just didn't exactly know how to differentiate themselves from other food types. So to most people, Puerto Rican was just different Mexican. So I think, and because there's so many similar restaurants in the area, I mean, within a half a mile you have 4 Mexican restaurants. It's a difficult business to begin with, and then if you have competition like that, it's tough. So we, as almost like a joke, we were saying, next time the restaurant, whatever restaurant it is, moves out, we're gonna just take it over, and that way we can avoid, their smell and their noise next door. And then we eventually said, well, since we have it, let's see if we can run it. So let's put it this way: I don't regret it. I don't know if I'm going to do another one. It's one of those things that when we were doing it, we were saying most of the time people regret the things they didn't do, not the things they did. This one was walking a very fine line. It admittedly it's the toughest industry to be in, and even though by being a vegan restaurant, we will have patrons drive 30-40 minutes. That would not happen if we were just another steakhouse.
When did you open this?
Right before Christmas 2021. So we've
that
been
was
open.
a tough time, right?
So we actually got the keys to the place December 2019, and we were gung ho on opening by March, April 2020, and COVID had other ideas. So it basically put everything on pause. Also allowed us to have a little more time to work on the restaurant itself. Gave us more time to kind of toss around ideas of what kind of food we wanted to offer. Eventually, I think we got lucky as far as the personnel, because we have a fabulous chef who's behind all the great dishes that people come here for. They don't come here to see me, they come here to taste the food.
Yeah, and your food's great. You have some pretty unique items too.
Originally, we weren't sure what ethnic foods we were going to go with. There was a original plan was to do it as a diner, kind of go with diner foods, do kind of burgers, fries, and shakes, for example. But then we thought more of offering foods that will appeal to non-vegans. There's enough restaurants that appeal to vegans. We wanted to offer dishes that non-vegans eat on a daily basis, to offer them in a vegan version so that they can see that they don't have to sacrifice anything as far as the taste when they switch to a plant-based version of their meal. So that's why we have, our chef was very familiar with a lot of Cajun dishes, so he veganized gumbos, etouffees, we have oyster mushroom po' boys, boudin balls, and things like that. So those are very popular, and we a number of times got the seal of approval from ethnic Louisianians that claim that this is one of the best version of gumbo they've had, even if it's vegan. And then things like burgers, spaghettis, kind of all over the place, simply because we also had this crazy idea that, a lot of times people will be like, what do you feel like today? Oh, I don't know, what do you feel like today? And they have to decide before they head out to a certain place what they feel like, and they have to kind of agree on a certain type of food. Here, you can show up and have, one person has a burger and the other person has a stir fry. So they don't have to decide what they're in the mood for before coming.
I had the etouffee.
Etouffee.
I had that the first night, and it was so good. Those oyster mushrooms and that sauce, it was like a gravy.
He has a way of making a roux that's very thick, and then a bunch of veggies in there.
Nice. What's your most popular dish?
So I think, like, let's go by appetizer. I think the most popular are the boudin balls. So it's basically dirty rice formed into balls and deep fried. Sandwiches, I think the most popular one would be the vegan po' boy, oyster mushroom po' boy. Right next to a burger that's called the Queen Bee. It's a double-decker, 2 patties with a whole bunch of onion rings on it. So it's challenging.
I saw somebody eating that when I walked in the
Yeah.
first night, and I took a picture of it.
So we laugh because there's such a thing as junk food vegan. You can be a vegan and eat French fries and Oreos. Probably wouldn't last too long, but would be still vegan. But a lot of times veganism is associated with healthy. What we wanted to do is almost be a place, not so guilty pleasures. So there is, you can come here and order dishes that are steamed or sautéed, but you can also order fried Oreos.
I'm gonna have to try that.
They're actually one of the most popular desserts. So another thing we wanted to do is offer desserts that people that, let's say, were not always vegan had. One of them is creme brulee. So we have a very good vegan creme brulee that people love. So a lot of people come and say, oh, you know, I haven't had a creme brulee that I liked since I went vegan 6 years ago, and another, seal of approval from those.
Off camera, we were talking about how like you've been eating this food a lot.
Right, right. So with owning the restaurant came crazy work hours. With that came lack of time for proper workouts, which is something as a personal trainer I shouldn't even be saying, because we kept on telling people, don't find the time, make the time, and here I am not making the time. But with not a lot of sleep and a hectic work schedule and not a lot of workout, I eat what I serve my clients, and I haven't noticed that I'm on a dangerous path to an unhealthy vegan. So weight is fine, maintaining muscle even though I'm not really training. I think maybe the fact that I'm working a lot burns a lot of calories, but
I really like to get the health message out there as much as possible. And so on my channel I have a lot of doctors, and I'm always saying, eat whole plant foods exclusively, beans, greens, grains, fruits, veggies, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. I even go as far as saying like the packaged processed foods aren't good for the environment.
So, and I completely agree with that. And if I wasn't doing what I'm doing, I would probably be following exactly that path. But I actually kind of see myself still as an activist. If by doing this, maybe not walking this pure path of veganism and presenting this to those that want to dip their pinky into veganism, and they do it through this rather than a raw vegan place that they might be they try it once and they don't give it another chance. Here they will come back over and over and over again, and they will notice that, okay, I don't have to eat meat if I can eat a Beyond Meat patty and I get the same pleasure out of it. And now they're hooked. Now they can do their own modification. They can start cutting out. They can say, oh, okay, but so is all vegan food fake meat? And someone said, no, you can have whole food meat and it's even better for you. They're already there. So this is like
gateway,
perverted way of getting people to veganism, because the other clean, pure way didn't work or something like that. So we were going to use dirty tricks to make them vegan.
So what's the healthiest thing on your menu? Because you said you could steam some things.
So I mean, the cleanest one is steamed edamame.
Oh, okay. Well, that's excellent.
There you go. So I don't know what I would if someone gun to my head, what's the unhealthiest one? I think you start frying Oreos, you're on a slippery slope. And what's next? We can I've seen country fairs or state fairs. They fry butters of stick of butters. I've seen there's vegan butter. I could fry that. There's vegan cheese. I could fry that. But the thing is, this is not something you're gonna eat every day. This is something you might want to try, and again,
take your non-vegan friends.
Exactly. So we have the nice thing about this place is if we go to most 100% vegan places we used to go, we walk in, it's almost guaranteed that 90% of the people there are vegan. Here, 50% of the people that come here are not vegan.
Yeah, when I was here earlier, I was hanging out, just talking to people, and like you said, literally 50% of the people I met weren't vegan yet.
Right. Yeah. So if this is how they get introduced to veganism and then they find their own path, I did my job.
you have been an activist in the past, and this is like a new form of activism for you.
Yes.
Because you were outside talking to some people earlier, right?
That was the easy activism. When I was holding signs outside the rodeo or outside stores that were selling fur, or we were doing protests outside the Japanese consulate downtown against the dolphin slaughter and things like that. Those things are easy. You show up, you hold a sign for a couple of hours, you go home. This is your life.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. And you're doing a great job. I mean, like I said earlier, you were out there talking to a family. Some of them were vegan, some of them weren't.
So that family that I was talking to, whenever I have a chance, I like to get feedback. And the only vegan there was the mom. The 4 kids and the husband weren't vegan. I mean, they will eat sometimes her vegan cooking. And I joked right away. It's like, okay, the mom is vegan, mom cooks. She will cook vegan, and you're either going to eat vegan or you're not going to eat. How is this not work? So they were laughing, but and she shared some of her stories with me about how she's been vegan only for 2.5 months, so brand new vegan from Galveston. I told her, like, okay, 2.5 months, that's not enough time. Give it a year, everybody at these 2 tables will be vegan, because they will, it's lead by example. They will be able to tell that you don't get sick, you have more energy, do sports, and you don't hurt and recover instantly, and everyone will want to be like that. So that's the easy part.
Do you think you could ever be with somebody who isn't vegan?
Now I hope my wife doesn't leave me, but and I don't have to go through that dilemma. But so here's the thing. With veganism comes along with a lot of other character traits, I think. So you can't be. I guess you see now I'm gonna be contradicting myself, because I wasn't vegan and I think I was an okay person. And once I became vegan, not a lot of things changed, except I stopped being interested in things that exploit animals. I mean, maybe before I would consider going to an aquarium. Now I wouldn't. I was, at some point, horseback riding every once in a while. Now I wouldn't do it because it just doesn't feel right. And I will ignore all the people that say that they assure me that the horse enjoys it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it would be a challenge to see if I can turn that person vegan.
Yeah. Ann Denshaw, she did a book on this. She literally dated non-vegans.
Just for the purpose of turning them vegan.
Essentially, and make a book about it.
Interesting.
And she even told them up front, hey, I'm working on a book. So you were also not fond of cardio to the extreme that you are now.
I never considered myself an athlete. Mm-hmm. In school, did the minimum required and on PE. I mean, it was I was more a nerd in high school, president of the computer club and the flying club. But I also, for a while, I was on the swim team, but wasn't really driven. Let's put it that way. What I discovered that just by becoming vegan, I had more energy. So anything I wanted to do that was sports related was much easier. It came with less effort. So that will be, I picked up rock climbing and it was fun. It was easier, let's say easier. I'm into skydiving. That's not really a lot of physical effort. You just have to jump out of a perfectly fine airplane. As far as my workouts, didn't have time to go to the gym, which is a quarter of a mile away. I have a 250-pound tractor tire in the back alley, which I flip when I decide that enough is enough and I need to work out. I just turned 53, so I don't know what a 53-year-old should feel like or usually does. I kind of compare it to my friends that I grew up with and went to the university with. And I think I'm doing okay.
Yeah, yeah. I know you said your wife might have been a little concerned because you were tired looking, maybe, or something.
No, yeah, she said, "What? You're gonna be interviewed? You look like hell. You look like you haven't slept, for a week." And then she was like, "Well, they know you own a restaurant, so I guess they will understand." So
that's good to clarify that. Even though you don't look bad at all. But I did have one person on my channel, and this would be cool to get this out there because they literally worked third shifts the entire week, doubles, and I got with them on a Saturday morning after doing that all week, and he looked tired. And so sometimes people comment, if he looks tired, he needs to eat meat.
yeah, but
like,
I just out of fun added up I worked 107 hours last week. 107-hour weeks is a long week.
Yeah.
So I mean, I have the right to look tired, even vegan. And then I flipped the script. I mean, okay, I don't think I would be able to do this if I wasn't vegan.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
So I went when I had time to get to the gym, and there was I was involved in this thing called Training for Warriors, which is kind of a spin-off from CrossFit. Kind of a lot of body weight exercises, a lot of circuits, but also a lot of heavy lifting. And at some point, I was deadlifting. I think at that point was, I don't know, 365 or something like that. And I did it, and I was like, I'm vegan and I can lift 365. And he goes like, do you have any idea how much more you would have lifted if you weren't vegan? And I was like, okay, there's no winning. It's just like, you can always spin it the other way.
Right. You have any regrets?
Yeah, that I didn't do it earlier. Honestly.
Why didn't you?
I no. Well, one was earlier, meaning the day I decided to become vegan, and that would be extra 2 years of me being vegan. That was, I guess, the preconditioning I had by being a personal trainer and having a completely different attitude towards eating. I can't say no one suggested it because my ex-wife did, and I laughed it off. Maybe if I had a vegan friend who was, knew how to present the facts
Propaganda.
to me as an animal lover, then I could have been vegan longer and maybe lived healthier longer.
You have any quotes?
Most of the quotes that I always, if I remember them, because right now I don't think I'll be able to remember a single one, are just the typical memes that I come across and I laugh and I save. And it's like with jokes, if you hear one joke during the night, you can go next day and repeat it. But if you hear 15, you will not remember a single one. So it's same thing with the quotes. But I think one of my favorite ones that I've seen around, and it's been attributed to different people, at some point to Einstein, at some point to someone else, but whoever said it had to do with the fact that as long as we exploit and kill and eat animals, there will be war. It's to some people that will be a stretch, but it's true, because if you will extend compassion and mercy towards animals, then you will automatically have to do the same towards people. You can do it the other way. You can be loving and merciful to people and treat animals like shit. But if that's flipped and animals are animals are friends, not food, all that thing, it goes deeper than that. Once you become a compassionate person, it translates to a lot of things.
Do you think we're ever going to get to a point where it's going to take violence to get people to wake up to this?
I think the peaceful way is better, and when I say peaceful, I mean money. because you can try to blame, you can guilt someone into acting vegan. It won't be sincere. It will be against their will. Even when I say money, since we became vegan, a number of companies that were strictly animal agriculture companies branched off into plant-based meats and cheeses and meat substitutes. Did that because they suddenly felt compassion towards animals? No. They saw that as a profit to be made. And if at some point they notice that they're making more money from plant-based products than from the animal products, they will cut out animal products altogether. It's purely money-driven. I've seen, these purist vegans who say, okay, I'm not going to buy this product. Suddenly, oh, I found out that this company that makes this, almond milk also has dairy farms. I'm not going to support them. Why not? I mean, if you support their non-dairy line, they will, divest from the dairy line. I mean, they only do this for money. They didn't wake up one morning and said, "Oh, I suddenly love cows and I'm going to do goodbye vegans." No one ever does that. They only did this because they saw profit there. So if you make it profitable, they will do it. Now, it's going to be a while before all of that happens because, well, the animal agriculture is subsidized, and plants isn't. If suddenly the government stopped supporting a farmer that has cows, and that farmer switched to growing, strawberries in Scandinavia, there was a movement towards shifting away from dairy, and they were giving farmers the choice. Okay, if you stop, for example, and I don't want to misquote something and spread misinformation through your channel, but I read something where they were basically helping farmers switch from animal production to growing, plants, and most of them did, because it's not an easy job. Animal farming is difficult. If someone has a choice, then they might, switch to something easier. Maybe they're doing it because their parents did it, and then they were kind of burdened with the farm. Now, maybe they don't want to do it, and having the option of switching to growing strawberries or blueberries is more appealing.
Yeah, and I think when you say it's difficult, it's probably difficult because I've heard people who used to work on farms or live on family farms, and it was difficult for them to eat their friends. Is that what you mean by difficult?
The compassion part, yes, eating your friends. But they might have now, based on the information they have now, found out it's not healthy and it's bad for the environment, and they don't want to do it anymore. That's the difficult part as well. I mean, there's even around Houston, I can't remember, there was someone who switched from livestock to converted to an animal rescue. So.
Oh, yeah, sanctuary. Oh, you're talking about Renee?
Renee, right, exactly, yeah. So here you go, someone who was stuck on a path and did a 180.
What's your website?
The Hive Vegan Eatery.com.
And why do you call it the Hive?
So it kind of became a byproduct of our interior design. So when we originally were thinking of a name, it was the name we came up with was Good Food Kitchen, a plant-based eatery. It's kind of self-explanatory. There's, name Good Food in the name of the restaurant. It has to be good. But then at some point during the design of the space, my wife saw this design of the ceiling with the hexagon, and I don't know if it shows in the camera. So once we did that, we it kind of looks like a beehive. Also made it easier to come up with the rest of the color scheme, and we did the black and the yellow, the mustard yellow color kind of a thing. And it was also ended up being kind of a nod towards the bees, meaning, once, if the bees are gone, we're gone, kind of a thing. And it was kind of funny because when we opened, and it says vegan in the name, but not everybody knows what, non-vegans don't really know what vegan is all the way. So there's like, oh, vegan, and it's called the Hive, so you must have honey. It's like, no honey. no honey, because we're vegan.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's like one of the things that somebody might understand veganism pretty well, but that's the one thing that's the kind of the gray area.
So it's going to be as gray as it is with picking up eggs from free-range chickens that have been rescued from a industrial farm. So it's that kind of gray, meaning, yeah, but the problem is in nature, a lot of times chickens will eat the leftover eggs for nutrition. So it's not like a zero-sum game. In case of bees, it's a little more dark, let's put it that way, because you don't ask the bees nicely to live in the beehive, and if they choose to move, you just let them leave, because that would happen if they decide that the surrounding areas are not rich enough in pollen-bearing plants, then they will pack up and leave. One of the ways to not make them leave, to not allow them to leave, is you got two ways. One, there's a little cage where you keep the queen where she can't leave, so you're enslaving the queen, and that way the hive does not move. Or you rip out her wings and she doesn't move. Both of them not very vegan ways of harvesting honey. So that's why no honey. And the fact that the honey, the obscene amount of work that the bee has to put to make a teaspoon of honey, that's about how much they collect in their lifetime, a teaspoon. And we make it so that they have to produce more than is needed for them so that we can take it. Just, I know it's, at some point, you become vegan, you just push the line further and further and further. And it's like, what's wrong with silk? For example, I didn't see anything wrong with leather before because I considered that a byproduct of the meat industry. Well, we were eating meat anyway, so leather would go to waste. And then I found out that there are places where the cows are killed just for the skin. So, yeah, no leather.
And it's cool that you have the word vegan in the name. A lot of people try to stay away from that for fear of...
We considered that for a while. That's why the first name had the plant-based eatery in it. And then there was another restaurant that opened not too far away. And they, I think, said that they were plant-based. A lot of people actually had issues with some of the dishes that they had, and I'm not going to bash my closest competition, but and I'm not going to name them or anything. But I think the people that were in charge of designing the menu weren't really familiar with the vegan concept, so they were calling the restaurants 100% plant-based, and they had eggs and fish. So hardcore vegans started screaming foul, and we were like, okay, we can't be that close to that restaurant and also be plant-based and be on the same street, because we're going to get confused. People are going to say, oh, that plant-based restaurant, no, they have fish and eggs. So we were like, okay, it's vegan. So there's vegan in the name. So, people who are going to hate it, are going to hate it. People who are going to love it, are going to love it. So we drew the line in the sand.
I love it, man. I had to struggle with VeganLinked. Do I call it VeganLinked or do I call it, something else? Because I really became an activist when I learned about the nutritional side, when I learned about the plant-based, whole foods being so healthy. But then I discovered, plant-based could include other things. It could have a nominal amount of animal in it and still be plant-based.
Right, but there's also the other issue. So it's like to me, plant-based is a diet. It strictly describes your eating. You can have 100% whole food, plant-based diet, walk around wearing fur, riding a horse. or an elephant. So it has nothing to do with the welfare of animals. That is just the way you eat. Vegan is the way you live and also eat. Now, I can be a vegan and I might not eat 100% whole food plant-based diet, but none of my food will include anything from animals. But I also won't wear fur. I will not buy a car that has leather seats as a brand new car. If it's a used car, I'll buy it. Damage is done. The leather is there, but I didn't contribute to the increase in demand. People kind of draw these arbitrary lines, I think, depending on their individual feelings. Like, I will not eat at a restaurant that cooks my vegan portobello mushroom on the same grill that they grill the steak on. Mm-hmm. The cow doesn't care. I do it for the cow. The cow doesn't care. Mm-hmm. And neither do I. Now, if I order a portobello mushroom and I accidentally get the steak, I will be very upset because that's creating demand for something that I was trying to avoid. Do I have leather belts at home? I probably still have some. I didn't throw them away. Why?
I've got one.
Yeah, it's done.
From 1990.
I already gave them the money.
Yeah.
So now I'm just being silly.
Yeah.
Now I will not wear, for example, a leather jacket that's leather, because that would be kind of giving the wrong signal to people who are just looking for wrong signals. And I will probably avoid wearing stuff that looks too real to real leather, because some people can't tell the difference. You're a hypocrite. You're a vegan wearing leather. It's like, no, it's not leather. Look at the label. I mean, it's like, come on. And why do I have to fight? I pick my fights very carefully.
Not only have you been vegan for quite a while, prior to that, you were a voice for animals. I interviewed somebody recently, and he's kind of a new vegan. It's mostly for health reasons. And like you said, there's always a way to take it to another level, right? Well, at the end of the interview, I was like, are those shoes leather? And he didn't know. But then we started looking into it, and chances are they probably are. So now I'm like, oh, God.
When I look at all the reasons why people go vegan, and, you get compassionate, health, for the environment, those are the basic ones. I think the one that is, let's say, most durable is the compassionate one. Because if you decide that you do not want to contribute to the suffering of animals, that's it. There's no going back. You can't wake up one day, it's like, now maybe I will, allow a couple to die. Or, do I really care if, a few of them get tortured? It just doesn't happen. With the other ones, there is always a way to revert. If those are the only reasons, because people could be for more than one reason. They don't have to be just one. But if someone becomes vegan just for health reasons, there's a very good chance that once the medical condition that led them to veganism is resolved, they might go back to their own old habits.
Yeah.
It's relatively easy, especially if they might go back and notice that, oh, I actually felt better on the vegan diet, and they flip-flop back and forth. But the ones for environmental reasons, what if purely theoretical, because it's not going to get there, everything else goes according to plan, and suddenly the CO2 emissions are zero, and the environment is dandy, and you're saying, so, well, now, I mean, the contribution to the, deterioration of the climate is so negligible, then maybe I can have that steak. So again, I think the one that's like religious is the animal one.
It's not really religious. I mean, because
no, religious in quotes. Yeah. Religious where it's like, well, not even religion. You can change your religion. So I think it's the one that will make people stick to their stay committed.
I think it's very accurate what you're saying, and mature. And I wonder, how do you know that? Because I guess maybe I'm so optimistic or something. And I think if people realize they don't need to eat it for their own health, then they'll have this epiphany or awakening to the ethics that they've been desensitized to. But I've seen instances many times like what you're saying, and so I'm wrong in feeling that way sometimes. And so it's like, I wonder, like, have you seen that happen or something? Because like you seem to know this very well.
In my personal experience, I've had people sit across the table from me during a business lunch at a steakhouse where everyone was ordering meat and I was ordering something that the chef decided to create. It was a pasta with vegetables. It was the nicest looking meal on the table, and suddenly everyone was jealous.
Yeah.
But suddenly I can't eat because I am like almost sparring with people at the table who are trying to jab these bizarre questions at me. It's like, well, what about butter? I said, no, well, there is vegan butter. Okay, do you eat peanut butter? I said, yes, I do. But it's butter. No, it's called peanut butter, but it's not butter. And you know, and suddenly you're explaining to adults things that you thought are obvious, and suddenly they're not. They're not obvious. And I've had someone who was like, you know, asking the weirdest questions, which Google answers after you type the first 3 letters of the word. At that point, you know, I was ready to actually stab him with my fork. And a year later, he was vegan.
Oh, cool.
He came to that conclusion on his own. Yeah. So I strongly believe in those seeds that are planted. And the interesting thing is the people that are, what I've noticed, the most passionate about being against veganism, passionate about, you know, meat eating and things like that, will be the ones that are actually turn around. The ones that will not are the ones who don't care. I've noticed the ones that, like, you know, you can say, do you know what happens to the animals at dairy farm? Yeah, I know. Do you know what happens to slaughterhouses? Yeah, I know all that. I mean, there is no, what button do you push to make? Do you know that this is unhealthy? Yeah, but everything is unhealthy. So you can't reach these people. But the ones that are like, you know, almost willing to fight for their point of view, they will actually, you know, leave the table and spend the next several months replaying something. Then they will see something else, then they will hear something else, and they will add it all up and decide on their own that that's their decision, and they will do it. We know tons of people that became vegan since we became vegan, and a lot of them claim that it's because of us, which is great. You know, if I turned one person vegan, I did my job. But apparently I turned a whole bunch, you know, whole families, not just me, but we did. And that makes us, that's worth, you know, everything we did.
Yeah. You know, and it's amazing because I'm in Texas.
Exactly. But now, you know,
it seems like
there's Texas and there's Texas.
Well, you know, it's like what you're saying though. The most adamant meat eater is going to do.
But also,
you would think that would be here.
We're in Houston, and you go to Austin, and you're going to be in Austin. But go to someplace between Houston and Austin, you might not have a lot of vegans to interview. So it's just recently, I think someone said that Houston is one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the U.S. And I was like, not New York, not D.C. It's like, no, apparently the most culturally diverse places is Houston. With that many different people, you're gonna have people who eat meat and people who don't eat meat. But then you go into a place, you know, somewhere between Houston and Dallas or Houston and Austin, and they were never exposed to this concept. I mean, you've got internet, but I mean, it doesn't really matter.
They probably think city folk are crazy.
Yeah. Plus, you know, it's pinky liberal commies wrote that. So, you think we'll ever see a vegan world? I think so, except I don't think we will see it. I mean, I'm a big fan of Star Trek, and you know that society is vegan, and you know,
It's funny, you're not the first person to mention Star Trek. I had one guy go vegan because of Twilight Zone.
Whatever works. I mean, they claim that Earthlings is the vegan maker. That's what they call the documentary. It's called The Vegan Maker. I tried that trick on my parents. Didn't make them vegan. Made my dad cry, which was yay, because he was like, he was shocked. He didn't become vegan, but he did exactly what was expected. He told 5 other people about the documentary. Job well done.
Now, do you think your advocacy that you did prior to this restaurant, holding up signs, was effective?
I think this is affecting more people. Mm-hmm. If I held a sign outside the rodeo, people were already there. I mean, maybe they thought about not going. But most people say, "Oh, I don't go there for the animals. I go there for the music." I mean, they separate things like that. It's one event. It's the same ticket. You're giving them money. This whole thing that I didn't know this about school programs before moving to Texas, about kids having to raise an animal and then having it killed. It's like young.
They do that in school here?
You have your own sheep or your own cow, and then you take it to slaughter. And it's traumatic for the kids. I forgot what it's called. It's the Young Farmers of America, whatever it's called.
Future farmers.
There you go. Future farmers. Future Farmers of America. I think that's if you want to scar a kid, that's one way to do it.
Is there anything that we didn't cover you think would be cool to get out there?
Kids, eat your broccoli. I think the best way is to, do your thing and have them wonder and ask. The ongoing joke is, how do you know someone is a vegan? Don't worry, they will tell you. We don't. Most of the time we don't tell people, and it kind of comes out in conversation that they're initiating.
But what's wrong with telling people?
If it's like, "Hi, I'm vegan," it's kind of that's where all the jokes come from.
It's not usually like that. It's usually like, "Hey, man, let's go get a steak."
Yeah,
they're saying they're not vegan, right?
Right.
And then so we just respond, and then of course we're going to tell them. But they started it.
Yeah, they started it. Now you're being singled out as the.
Yeah, you've clearly been evolving progressively throughout your entire life. That's a good message to get out there because, I'm doing something totally different, but this is using what my skills were, what I was capable of doing, and taking it to the extreme. And that's what you're doing. You're taking it to the extreme here. You're
right. So one of the things that will maybe makes this more as a activism than actually a business venture is because I don't even have an idea if this is going to make money ever. But I think the fact that I'm affecting people's lives in some way by at least introducing them to the word vegan, even if it's through fried Oreos, then I think it's great. So we actually said that this is going to eat up a lot of our time and money, but it's going to affect a lot of people. So let's keep on doing it.
And you can't take money with you anyway. So what the hell?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and since we're all vegan, we're going to live forever. So.
Wait a minute. Then that means we need more money. But that's good stuff, man. I love the conversation, and I appreciate your time,
Well, thank
man.
you.